everybody, and we are going to be covering Henri Winship, which occurred in 1970 in this micro lecture. So the first thing I want to point out before we get into the details of this case is that in the juvenile court, which we know is a civil court, we keep it in a civil court and out of the criminal court to avoid stigmatization of juveniles. In the civil court, the standard of evidence is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In a criminal court, the standard of evidence, in a criminal court, this standard of evidence is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In the civil court, the standard of evidence is the preponderance of the evidence. And what that means is whoever has more evidence essentially wins the case. So if you're a juvenile and you're accused of some sort of crime and you can prove that you didn't do it more than the state can prove that you did do it, that's all it takes for you to be exonerated. It's a much lower standard of evidence. It's much easier for a prosecutor to win a case because they just have to have one step more of evidence than the defense in order to adjudicate a juvenile delinquent. So it's important to understand the distinction between those standards of evidence as we get into Winship. Winship was a 12-year-old who had stolen a wallet from a woman's locker. He was adjudicated delinquent for this act and given a sentence in a juvenile detention center for 18 months. However, Winship's attorney argued that the standard of proof in the civil court, preponderance of the evidence, was not stringent enough in this case where a juvenile can lose their freedom. That if a juvenile could be put into secure confinement, we have to have a higher standard of evidence. The same standard of evidence, in fact, that we offer adults who could lose their freedom, which is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt requires the state to provide much more evidence to demonstrate that someone is guilty before we can remove their freedom. Whereas civil court, which we use specifically for juveniles, but also for civil litigation, it's just whoever has the most evidence wins, right? So whoever has just a bit more evidence supporting their argument is the one who wins. But Winship's attorney said, look, if you're going to possibly take my client's freedoms away, then we need to raise that bar, that standard of evidence. We need to be very sure, because it doesn't matter if you're an adult losing your freedom or if you are an adolescent losing your freedom. The loss of freedom is catastrophic at any age. Therefore, any court, criminal, civil, or otherwise, before they can revoke someone's freedom, better really prove their case. They better have a very sure case. Not just a better case than the other side or the defense, but a very strong case. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So they appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court granted certiorari, and they reviewed the case, and they agreed. And they said, hey, if somebody is going to, if a juvenile might lose their freedoms, then yeah, we need to be very sure of their responsibility for what they're being accused of. So we're going to raise that standard of evidence from preponderance of the evidence to proof beyond a reasonable doubt in juvenile proceedings where detention is the possible consequence. In situations where it's just diversionary or it's community corrections, you don't need to raise the standard of evidence beyond preponderance of the evidence. But if they could be put in a secure confinement facility, taken from their home, taken from their parents, taken from free society, yeah, we need to be very sure that if we're doing that, that we have enough evidence to support that. And the way we do that is by making that standard of evidence the proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard in such instances. So just to clarify, for other potential outcomes in the juvenile court, things like probation or counseling or drug treatment or therapy of some kind, preponderance of the evidence is still the standard. The court needs to just prove more so than not that the juvenile was responsible for the criminal action or the guilty act. But in cases where detention is up for grabs, where freedom loss is a possible outcome for the juvenile, the standard of evidence must be raised to proof beyond a reasonable doubt.